Hello, Dr. Steve here. I'm doing a little video about some photography principles. I'm going to be using a Canon camera setup with probably at least one lens, maybe a couple different lenses to test something out. And I'm using the depth of field calculator that's available for your phone. And I'm going to show what I'm doing. All right, here's what we have here. I have my cell phone with the depth of field calculator, a Canon EOS 5D Mark IV with the Canon EF 70-200 millimeter f2.8L IS3 USM lens, and that is a very nice lens. It can go 70 millimeters to 200 millimeters, and it can go wide open to an f2.8. I'm going to be talking a little bit about aperture, depth of field, and distance. First thing first is I'm going to shoot a shot from this distance. I'm at the end of the table that I have, and then I have a feature wall off at the distance here, and I'm going to measure that distance. And so I have a Bosch laser that can tell me the distance. So I'm going to turn that on. And what that does is sends out a little laser based upon the distance. Now it's set up to go from the back of the laser here where my thumb is to whatever the target is with the laser pointer. Do you see the pointer on the wall? So if I set this down here on the edge of the table right to the wall, it is about 6 feet 10 inches and 7/8 of an inch. So it's almost 7 feet. And you'll notice whenever I use my camera, we want to put in some settings on my camera. So let me show that. So I'm looking at the back of my camera, and I can change several things because I'm in the manual mode. I put the ISO at 5,000. This is an inside house lighting environment. 5,000 might be a little high for the ISO, but with this camera, it doesn't add too much of a grainy appearance to the final images. So blurring won't be necessarily from grain. It could be from a couple of things. Depth of field that's too far out of the focal plane, or camera shake. This is a long lens. This whole setup is kind of heavy. That actually sometimes can be beneficial because when you're holding the camera, the weight can actually help you make a tripod with your hand and the way you lock it in against your face when you're looking through the viewfinder. So you're sort of making a tripod. Or one could put it on a tripod. So let's see here. Let's get this camera to turn back on again. I just shot a picture by accident. Let me go to my menu and format my card. So there's nothing on this card. Okay, so here we are. We're at the settings. I have the shutter speed at 1/200th of a second. It's a good idea that you not shoot faster, or excuse me, slower than the length of your camera. So if you're at 200 millimeters, so that's fully zoomed, if you go less than 1/200, meaning the shutter speed goes more slowly, you might introduce some camera shake by your holding or breathing while you're holding the camera. That can add a little bit of blurriness to the image. Then over here on the right, we have our aperture setting. This is wide open at 2.8, and of course you can go smaller on any lens. 8, f8 at 1/200 and 5,000 will probably be too low light for this setting. Let's just do a meter reading. The meter reading's in the very negative, but if I go down to 2.8, this meter reading should be pretty good for in here. Yeah, it's about almost 0. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot an image here. And the autofocus, yeah, so my meter reading is right at the middle, so it's 0 for exposure. It's a perfect exposure, and I shot a picture of a picture, and it showed it briefly on the screen. But if we zoom in on this image, we can see that it is very sharp, tack sharp, on my screen. You got to look at your shots, and I did it a little bit fast. So there's a slight blur actually, probably a little bit of camera shake. But we'll see that here on the indicator, the autofocus is at a little over 2 meters, so there's 3 feet per meter, so that's 6 feet. And it looks like it's almost right at 7 feet in green. It's hard to read here. It's very dark. But if you were to adjust manually, you could kind of figure that out. If you knew you were 7 feet, you'd put on 7 feet, and then it should be in focus, anything at 7 feet. For a depth of field, now at a certain aperture setting. So let's get into that. All right, so using the depth of field calculator, you would put in your kind of camera. I'm using the Canon EOS 5D. In other words, it's basically a full frame sensor camera, but it had it in here, the 5D series. I put my aperture at 2.8, my focal length at 200 millimeters. I was fully zoomed at 200 millimeters with the zoom lens. The subject distance was roughly 7 feet. And that means I have a depth of field of a mere 0.69 inches. So not even a whole inch, a little over half an inch. And you see this picture shows what a depth of field is. So if you have two subjects, you're right smack in the middle, you've got 0.69 inches total distance from the point that you're focusing on. So that's not a very deep depth of field. The distance from the nose to the eye is about maybe a couple inches. And so, you might focus on somebody's eye and the tip of their nose will be blurry. So at that distance. So one would have to back up in order to have a bigger depth of field. So let's just say we go to 20 feet. Now we have a depth of field of 6 inches. So now that's from the tip of the nose to basically the ear. Could be in focus if you're focusing on the eye, because you got a full 6 inches in front of and behind of that spot that you're focusing on. So a full 6 inch, so 3 inches in front and 3 inches behind for a full 6 inches. So 3 inches to the nose, 3 inches to behind the ear if you're focusing on an eye at 20 feet away with this telephoto lens at aperture f2.8. So that's kind of that real quick. I'm going to do a demonstration. I'm going to show the setup here next. All right, I took some notes here about the camera and the depth of field information from the calculator. That my depth of field with this camera setup and lens at 7 feet, 0.69 inches depth of field. At 20 feet, 6 inches depth of field. So it's about 10, you get a 10x increase in the depth of field by doubling your distance. So from going from almost 10 feet to 20 feet, it goes from almost 0.7 inches to 7 inches. So it multiplies by 10. I don't know if that holds true for going to 30 feet. Let's see if we go up another. Let's put it on 30 feet here and see what it says. 30 feet, 13.67, so it almost doubles it. So 2 times 6 is 12, and that's 13. So, all right, so 2 times 7 is 14. So it almost doubles your depth of field every 10 feet. Let's go 10 feet and just see exactly what it is at 10 feet. Let's see. 10 feet's 1.45 inches. So, yeah, so anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a demonstration here in my home with some objects that are spaced apart from each other, and I'm going to measure those out here in a second. All right, what I have here is some targets. So I've got a Morton salt container up against the wall. I have a book, it's actually a study Bible, on the end of a coffee table. I have a bottle for sparkling water, Gerolsteiner, with a blue piece of tape on the top in the middle of the table, distance-wise. And then the closest corner of the table, I have an orange one. And then in front of the table here on the floor, I have one that doesn't have anything on the bottle. So those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different distances spanning a little bit over the length of a couch. And I'll measure that out here in just a moment. Okay, based upon the laser reading, from the top of the bottle here, the closest to me, the Gerolsteiner, it's 8 feet to the wall. The next one on the corner here is 6 feet to the wall. The one in the middle of the table is 4 feet to the wall. The study Bible's front is 2 feet to the wall, and the Morton salt is right at the wall practically, so only inches away from the wall, maybe 3 or 4 inches. So we've got an 8-foot distance here to get a depth of field if we want everything in focus. If we focus on the middle Gerolsteiner, we got 4 feet to here and 4 feet to the wall. So we need a 4-foot depth of field. And so 6 inches isn't going to cut it. So you need to be greater than 20 feet away at 2.8. So let's see what that is with the depth of field calculator. I'll run these numbers and see if we can pull it off. And we cannot. Okay, so using the depth of field calculator, it's not possible to do an image at f2.8 and get all of those items in focus with the distance that I have to work with in my home. If I back all the way up to my front door, that's over here. Okay. Standing in front of my front door, it is 23 feet to the middle bottle. And so 23 feet, I only have a depth of field. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm not good with using this gimbal. Okay, there we go. 23 feet, it's 7.898 inches. So it's about 8 inches. And these bottles are, and everything is 2 feet apart from one another. So that is, you'll have the middle bottle in focus and everything else will be out of focus. So anything I focus on, anything more than 8 inches away from it will be unacceptably out of focus, no matter what I do. So let's play with the depth of field calculator and see what f-stop will give us at least 24 inches, 2 feet. We really want 4 feet, so that's 4 times 12, 48 inches. So let's see what we got to do. All right, so based upon the depth of field calculator, if I increase my aperture to f9, and I'm at 23 feet from my subject at the full zoom of the lens at 200 millimeters, I get a depth of field of 25 inches. So 25 inches is just over 2 feet. So at best, I can get the middle Gerolsteiner bottle on the coffee table in focus, and the study Bible lettering reasonably in focus, and the Gerolsteiner bottle on the corner of the table reasonably in focus, because they're each within that 2 feet, right? So that table is, I guess, 4 feet long, and I'll have 2 feet in front, 2 feet behind. So honestly, I don't think I can even get 3 things in focus because that's less than 24 inches. So the best I can do is to get 2 of them in focus. So if I focus on one of the Gerolsteiners, maybe one of the other ones might be a little bit in focus, but they'll both be just on the edge of the focal plane because they're more than 2 feet so apart. So that won't work, not at 200 millimeters. So let's see if we go to a different focal length. Okay, so by playing around with the depth of field calculator, I'm figuring out that at 100 millimeters, so half of what this lens can do, I can go to 23 feet away from my subject matter and have an aperture of f9, and I get over 8 feet depth of field. So that means 8 feet, 4 feet in front, 4 feet behind, whatever I focus on, should be acceptably in focus. It won't be perfect, but it should be reasonably in focus. So if I focus on the middle Gerolsteiner bottle, which I'm going to show again, there's the one that's close to me, is about 4 feet away from the one in the middle of the table. And then the Morton Salt's 4 feet away from the middle table Gerolsteiner bottle. And so I should have the study Bible in focus and the Gerolsteiner bottle on the corner of the table in focus. And I should have the Morton Salt. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subjects that are within an 8 feet, over 8 feet area of focal distance should be in focus. Let's try that out. I'm going to be shooting at f9. So given the light scenario in here with an aperture of f9, and that stops down the light, and I have my sensitivity of the sensor on the camera set at 5,000. I really don't want to go a whole lot higher than that. I'll probably have to do a longer shutter speed, which means camera shake is going to happen because it's going to certainly be slower than 1/200. So I'm going to put it on a tripod and get the light meter reading correctly, and then I'll take a shot and see how it comes out. All right, so here I am looking at I took 2 pictures, one at f9 ISO 5000, and I had to go down to a shutter speed of 1/20th to get an exposure that was proper. And I'm looking at it, and what I'm noticing is that that did not focus exactly the way I wanted it to on the furthest elements. And so I'm having a hard time holding this camera. So I'm trying to hold my gimbal and have it not fall down. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. So when I look through the picture and zoom, the Morton salt's it's reasonably in focus. Okay, they're okay. But I went to f11, so let's see what that looks like. f11, it's a little bit more in focus. I had to go to 1/13 of a second shutter speed, so even slower. So there might be a little camera shake. If you were holding it, you would have camera shake, but I may have jarred the camera a little bit, but everything is in the focal plane and shooting that way. So the depth of field calculator definitely can help planning a picture. So if you know you're about 20 some feet away from some action that's going to be happening within, say, 8 feet, or you got a group of people that are 8 feet deep, all standing together, you want the person in the back to be in focus and the person in the front. You aim to somebody somewhere in the middle, and you make sure you have your settings right, and you should be able to pull it off. If it's not working, go to a wider angle and a higher shutter speed, or excuse me, a higher f-stop, so a smaller opening, and it will be more depth of field for your distance, or back up. So you could do those three things: back up, wider angle, and a higher shutter speed if you're able to do, or excuse me, I keep saying shutter speed. It's going to be a lower shutter speed to let in more light. You're going to be tightening down the aperture. So those are a few things that can be done. If you're wide angled at 70, let's see what that does. Let's see here. We'll put that in 23 feet. I went to f11. So that gave me an 11-foot depth of field. So, it still was a little bit wonky. I thought it still was on its acceptable sharpness. I'm trying to get letters to look sharp, and I figured letters are a good way to do that. And that still was slightly blurred. I can look at the pictures in post on the computer, but zooming in on my camera, I thought they were a little bit blurry. I thought f9 was a little bit worse. But if we would go all the way wide to, say, 70, because with telephoto lens at the extremes, I think they're more accurate. Wow, that would give us a full 28 feet. So that should definitely be sharp. Let me shoot one at wide open at f11 and see how that looks. And at f11 wide open, we'll see if I have to make a even slower shutter. But that's where you got to use a tripod. All right, we'll give that a try. Okay, so I shot some photographs, and I actually looked at the video that I shot. I don't really feel like editing the video. But anyway, I wanted to go over a couple things. One, I was talking about the distance when taking a picture of the face, for example, the distance from the nose to the eye. So if I put up a measuring stick, ruler, and I just kind of mark the corner of my eye here, from the tip of my nose, corner of my eye, get a rough idea. That's about 3 inches. So that's 3 inches. Now from the corner of my eye to the back of my ear, let's mark that. That's about 3.5, almost 4 inches. So it's about 7 inches from the nose to the ear. Yeah, I'm just under 7 inches here on the measuring stick. So the eye is somewhere around 3.5 inches looking straight on. So when we focus on the eye, we want the eye to always be in focus. It kind of looks weird if the tip of the nose is blurry. So if we get the nose and the eye in focus and the ear starts to blur out, that's fine. That's a beautiful portrait. And we get a nice buttery bokeh effect where everything looks blurred out all around. So a narrow depth of field is sometimes great for portraits. But you run into problems. You have 2 people standing next to each other, or a group of people. Now you've got multiple focal lengths that are from nose to eye, and you need to have a depth of field that's going to be further back. And if you're up close, and it's always good to get in close to make a good photograph and crop in, or you zoom in close, you're compressing your depth of field. You're narrowing your depth of field with the aperture or the compression effect of the zoom lens. And so sometimes actually stepping backwards, you can expand your depth of field and get all the subject matter that you want in focus in the focal plane, the depth of field. So that's important. If you're trying to shoot pictures of moving individuals or moving subjects, for example, 2 people wrestling or some sports event, you're going to want to be far enough away and know roughly where your focal point is in the middle in order to split that depth of field in half that is in focus. So everything in your composition is going to be reasonably in focus or tack sharp. And you got to take into account camera shake with moving the camera, breathing, which changes the depth of field, breathing. So if you're going real close, you're trying to get that bleeding edge depth of field, which adds a really neat artistic effect. You got to play with the science there. A tripod can be very helpful because now you can lower the speed of your shutter and it's going to take longer to let light in. Now that will introduce a problem if you're dealing with moving subjects, because a subject that's stationary, it's going to be in focus because it doesn't move. You can just sit there and take your time with letting all the photons of light slowly get into the camera. But if it's moving, then it's going to blur. And I actually made some pictures that have fun with that, writing with some light, and I'm going to show those here in just a moment. I'm here in my room that is set up here as my little workshop, and I'm going to flip the camera around and show my monitors. I'm not sure how I can get this wider angle for the lens on this Osmo recorder, so I might have to play around with that a little bit. Let me flip the camera around. Okay, so it looks kind of zoomed in here. Let me back up. All right, so I think I'm seeing enough of, it's hard to see what I'm really focused on here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I love Linux. I put in my card to read this video card and dumped all my videos into a folder, and that folder I put under a drive here called Linux Pictures, and I put it under my project for today. Or I thought I did. I guess I didn't. Okay. Oh, video. Yeah. Okay. So this Osmo camera makes two types of files. It makes LRF files, which is a log-based file that I think their proprietary software is able to do some color corrections. It also seems like they're very smaller files. And then it also makes MP4 files the way I have it set up. So what I did was, they're all in the same folder. I copied them over and individually into separate files. And I did that by opening the location with the terminal and doing a terminal command to selectively move just the MP4 files and to selectively move the LRF files into these different videos. And what's great is I can just open up the MP4 file, open up all of these at one time with a viewer and play my videos and see what my video looked like. But yeah, so that's so that's kind of cool. And I made my photographs with the camera, and the ones that I was videotaping, I was using my 70 to 200 lens, and I put all of those raw files. These are the CR2 files, and I'm highlighting right here on the left. And I opened all of them with a program called Darktable, that is a raw image manipulation program that does not destroy the original file. It makes this XMP file that corresponds to the file name. So it's the exact same file name with a .xmp. And what that does, it keeps track of all the changes to the picture, and then you can export your changes to a JPEG, which is a compressed file format. I also grabbed my other camera that had an 85mm lens on it and shot some pictures and did the same thing, and I exported those. So what I did was I put these up to a Google Drive folder, and we'll look at them from the Google Drive folder and make sure everything uploaded. This saves me some time. So I'm not going to open the raw files. I did upload those as well, but we're going to look at our JPEGs. And these are the ones that I was talking about with in the video. So let's see, we'll go over each one. So here was the close-up of the picture of, that's a photograph of bark or a tree that was on my wall. It looks like it needs dusted, needs tilted. I was a little embarrassed by the video. I needed to run my vacuum. My vacuum I forgot to plug in to charge, so it's dead. I meant the vacuum before I shot the video. So my dark flooring shows every little piece of dirt or whatever is on it, and it definitely needs clean. All right, so this, I put a little graphic on the bottom that tells the information about the photograph, so I don't have to look it up in the image properties. This was shot at 1/200th speed, handheld. So And I said, the focal length was 200 millimeters. It's not good to shoot slower than 1/200. So you don't want to go like 1/100 when you're shooting at 200, because that can introduce a little bit more camera shake blur. So 200 would be the floor for hand holding, in my opinion. I'm able to hand hold lower and sometimes pull it off just through practice, but there is a difference. So really, a tripod, if you're right at the 200 or lower, will help keep camera shake to a minimum, just the shaking of hitting the button, really. And I have a mirror in that camera, so the flopping of the mirror. So this is also at f2.8, so that's the wide open aperture for that lens. That's as low of an f-stop as it can go, so as wide open as it can go. And the ISO I set at 5,000. That does introduce a slight bit of grain maybe into the picture. You can see a little bit of the graininess here over this black part, but it's not blurriness. That's graininess from the sensor sensitivities getting the light noise. And I did not clean that up. There is some cleanup that you can do in post-processing. I just left that just for the example. So you can actually make some of that go away in post-processing. And this tells me the camera was the EOS 5D Mark IV, that I was using the lens, the EF 70-200 f2.8 IS2. It's actually the IS3. They didn't have that as an option in the drop-down. It doesn't seem to, I don't think it makes a big difference, but all right, so that's that picture that I was examining. That was shot at about 7 feet away, and the depth of field is about 0.68 inches, so a little over half an inch. So if I focused right on this bark, the depth to the wall is probably maybe even an inch. So, and if I ended up focusing on the wall, this might be a little bit off, because it might be a little bit off from that. So just with breathing and holding it, I might be changing the depth of field by a quarter of an inch just by moving back and forth a little bit while I'm holding the camera. So you got to think of that when you're really pushing the edges of the limits of the depth of field. That's the science behind why some pictures don't come out the way you expect them to when you're trying to do the art of composition, which I did none in this camera. I mean, this is crooked, everything's crooked. But anyway, it was an example just for focusing. All right, here we are at 1/120th of a second. So this is on a tripod. There's no way I could hand hold that and shoot it and have it stay sharp all the way through the whole focal plane at f9. And it was not 100 millimeters. I rotated the dial thinking it was 100. Looking at the numbers, it was actually 102 millimeters, close enough. In ISO 5000 with the same camera and lens. And I focused on this girl, the blue labeled Gerolsteiner, and I wanted the study Bible to be in focus, and I wanted the closer bottle to be in focus, and I really wanted the Morton Salt to be legible, and the Gerolsteiner in the front to be legible. And when I zoom in, they are. There's a little, there's a little bit of I don't know that it's blurriness from the depth of field as much as maybe the graininess at shooting at ISO 500, but everything is sharp when I zoom out where at the full zoomed at the max size of the picture without zooming in. Everything looks acceptable sharp. What's interesting is this box over here is further out than the 8 feet, what I had about 8, almost 9 feet of depth of field, and this is 4 feet, and this is 4 feet in front of this bottle, and the salt is 4 feet behind this bottle. So this is a good 8 feet from this bottle to the wall. And I have all of that essentially in focus. You see the whole couch is in focus. So, that worked out. Here's at f11, I kicked it up one more f-stop, which gives me even more depth of field. And I had to go a little longer time with the shutter being open, 1/113th of a second. So definitely hand holding is, I think, impossible at that low. So the tripod definitely is well worth an investment if you don't have one. And look, that is definitely, I would say that's more, everything's sharper. I gotta wait for this to load. There we go. Yeah, that everything is definitely, you can read natural mineral water on the bottom. You can almost read the fine print below the sea salt, iodized sea salt. So that's I'd say that's excellent. You can definitely read natural mineral water on the bottle, and you can read the finer print on the cover of that study Bible. So that worked out real well. The depth of field. Also, even look, the 50 count contractor, that's a little out of focus, but it's legible. And that was much further out than, I think that's another 4 feet away. So the depth of field's working. Here's 1/110th of a second, f11 at 70 millimeters. So the last one, I'm going to go back, was 102. So at 102 millimeters, so roughly 100 millimeters on the depth of field chart. Here we are at 70 millimeters at f11. That should give like a really big depth of field. Look, even the chair is in focus. I focused again on this bottle, and it's taken a second to load up the picture. It is sharp. The study Bible, the iodized salt, everything in this picture is in focus at that distance. It's about 23 feet from the camera to that blue taped Gerolsteiner bottle. So that worked out. Let's see the next one. I'm doing it f2.8 with 70 ISO just to see how narrow the depth of field gets. I was able to shoot at 1/160th of a second. You could almost handhold that carefully, and it probably would pull off, but this is on the tripod. I'm zooming in here on the photograph. I'm gonna wait a moment for it to load up with the zoom. And definitely that Gerolsteiner bottle is in sharp. The study Bible is not unacceptably out of focus, but it's definitely a little bit more out of focus. The bottle in the front that's orange is a little bit out of focus. So yeah, so definitely it's a narrower depth of field. It's less than 4 feet. And the iodized salt is legible, but it's a little out of focus. And this Gerolsteiner bottle in the front that was 8 feet from the wall so you can see the depth of field's narrower at 2.8. And then I did 5.6. I just slowly walked up a little bit here. I had to slow down to 1/40th of a second at 70 ISO, or ISO 500, 70 millimeters. Like the box is out of focus, which I wasn't even considering that. The chair has got some focal lanes, but let's see, this Gerolsteiner I think is in focus. Yeah, it is. It's a little bit, there's a little dithering to the picture when you look at some of the solid colors like this black. There's some a little bit of pixelation, so it looks grainy because of the ISO being 500. But that's not being out of focus, that's graininess. And look, the iodized salt, legible, so that definitely got it. 5.6 could work. And I believe I marched up and tried 8. That should be even better. Let's zoom in all the way. Let that load. Yeah, that looks even better, even sharper. That's fantastic. So, and that's 1/120th of a second. Definitely a tripod's needed for that. This is without a flash. Here I am at f10. And that's just widening the depth of field because I'm focusing on the exact same subject, and it's tack sharp. Everything's sharp on the table, and I'm getting the things outside of the table now. And look, even this box is probably starting to get in focus. Yes, it is. So I'm definitely widening the depth of field at that. So that was pretty cool. So those were that last one. Yeah, that was the F10. So that experiment demonstrated the depth of field calculator can be very helpful in planning photographs or evaluating what went wrong with a photograph. Why is stuff not in focus when I expect it to be? What am I doing wrong? It could be the distance from your subject and your narrowness of your depth of field. Now, I switched to an 85 millimeter lens. This is a prime lens. It is the Canon 85 millimeter 1.2 L lens, which is really great. And let's see what I did with that. So here we are. This tells me the information about the lens. It's the 85 millimeter f1.2 L2 USM. And this is a portrait monster, a low light monster. I love it because it can go to 1.2. Here I am shooting at f8 with it, so not taking advantage of the wide open aperture that it can do. And I'm shooting at 1/125th of a second with the ISO at 500. And so that's kind of, 85 millimeters, that's close to 70. So we would expect everything to be in focus at this depth of field. And it is. I mean, you can tell just zooming in here, even before it loads up. That looks really good. I did clean some of the pixelation up on this photograph. So I did a little bit of post-processing, which cleaned it up and sharpening. but it looks really good. Here's something else I did. I did it at f11 at 1/13 of a second to get that. And again, look, even this box is in focus. The depth of field for this, I think, is like, 24 feet if we look it up on the calculator. But I'll leave that to anybody watching that's interested. They can put in that information. Look how good everything looks. I mean, you can practically read the Morton Salt's fine print, which is 23 feet away from this lens. And this is a wide angle lens. Well, not, I mean, it's not wide angle, it's 85 millimeter lens. It's a prime lens. And here I am at 1.2, and at ISO 5000, I had to move the shutter speed to really fast, 1,250th of a second, really fast. And I should have lowered the ISO lower to compensate rather than shoot so fast. But that is just one way of making the exposure. You can have the ISO at 200, then this number would be a lower number. But the depth of field does not change. Look at this narrow depth of field at 1.2. It is at 23 feet away. This Gerolsteiner is in focus, and the one in the front is in focus, which is pretty amazing to me at 1.2, but that's because I'm so far away. Usually I'm much closer when I'm doing a portrait of a person. I'm filling the frame with an individual's head's probably about the size of this bottle. And I'm telling you, the depth of field is half an inch, or it seems like it. So being this far away, it opened up the depth of field. But apparently, even though I focused on this item, the item in the front, the orange tip, was also acceptably in focus, but the one 2 feet behind it was not. So this is definitely less than, probably about maybe a 2 foot, or maybe less than a 2 foot focal depth of field, and it was able to get two items. So if you focused on an eye, definitely the nose would be in focus, and hopefully the ear, but a person behind them would be out of focus if they were within 2 feet. So that's tricky with this lens. This lens takes practice because it's a prime. And then here I did a little more fun. I made it f16, and I did the, so versus this other one, ISO 500, I dropped the ISO down to 100, and I opened it wide open, and this is wide open at 5,000. So I did kind of the opposite. I dropped the ISO down to 100, and I made the f-stop much smaller, so 16. So that would be a completely pitch black picture unless you open the shutter for a really long time. So this is like, I guess, what is this, 6 seconds? So it's a long, long opening. And I had a string of little lights. I guess they're like fairy lights. They're little LEDs on a copper wire. And I just kind of moved them around. You can see my shadow here on the right when there's my feet. Down here I was standing there a little too long, so I showed up against the white background. But I did the fairy lights. And you can see I got a nice depth of field at f16 because the depth of field is really long. But I wasn't caring about the depth of field. I was trying to stop down the light. So I was stopping down the light. And look, that is so sharp. And there's no pixelation or graininess because I'm shooting at ISO of 100, which is just phenomenal. I mean, look, the couch looks perfectly smooth. And so I just left the shutter open longer and dragged light all over the place. So anything moving would be blurred out. So I'm ghosting out of the image. So if I was wearing the right clothing or stood in the right place, and this is how you make an artistic photograph with light, writing with light. I did a little more writing with light, exact same settings. I just was shooting it and moving the light around differently. You can see my arm here against a dark background. I was standing there a little bit long and pulling the string of lights. But I love it. Look how tack sharp the Gerolsteiner is. So if you have objects sitting still, you can do a nice long exposure at f16. Everything will be really in sharp, but it's a long exposure. I had time to drag lights around, and then I did it again, and then I think that's the end of it. That should be it here. Yeah, so that was fun. Writing with light with just in my house, just having fun, doing an experiment, passing some time, and making a video about it. All right, so I will pop this card out and convert it get it out of my camera card and put it in my local folder where I'm going to store it, and I'll upload my videos to a folder so that they can be watched sequentially as MP4s without having to do any editing. Well, that's me. It's Dr. Steve saying have fun and keep shooting and practicing and enjoy the science and art of photography.